Hello, everyone, and welcome. You are now listening to Something Interesting. And if you're not, well, we'll try our best to change that. I'm Levi, your producer, and with me, as always, are Legs O'Hiley.
What up?
And Tyler.
What do you do?
Two guys who somehow convinced me we need an audience. We're kicking things off with current events, where these guys break down what's been happening in the world with their own unique perspectives. Let's get into it, guys. The first topic is current events, primarily the No King protest that happened over the weekend. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
Yeah, I personally think, it's kind of wild. Just everybody out there talking about, no kings when we live in a country that already doesn't have a king, and we fought for that in 1776. So it just seems like either a waste of time or I don't know. I woke up this morning and we didn't have a king, so maybe it was just successful. Maybe we had one. I didn't know about it.
Yeah, I'm very libertarian at my core, and I've dipped my toe into the into both parties, and I'm always trying to decide if I belong on either side. And what we saw in this last election, where I didn't vote for either of them, was we had the side that's saying no kings tell us who our nominee was. That bugs me. That bugs me when they jump out and say, "Yeah, guys, I know there's normally a primary process, but we're just going to skip that, and we're just going to tell you this is the person that didn't make it past the first round really when she was running for president. She's now your choice. So." Here you go.
Yeah,
that's bullshit.
Yeah, I agree. And I think just how everything played out with, Joe Biden's decline and how the media kind of lied about that for so long to where, I feel like a year beforehand, they could have held a primary and kind of said, hey, Joe Biden's going to step down, which would have been like the good thing to do, I feel like. Give some of the other like Democratic candidates a chance. Because like you said, Kamala had such a bad, showing at the primaries before that against Joe, and then he selects her to be VP, and then she had a terrible like approval rating as VP. And I think like just waiting until the last second and just installing her with no primary, and then just throwing her up against Trump. If anything, it helped Trump because she didn't have a chance really to get out there and do all of the work it would have taken in the amount of time. Which maybe, was their plan. Maybe that's how they thought it was the best thing to do. But to me, I'm just like, it doesn't give your side a chance. And, they kind of did the same thing with Bernie back in 2016 where they just kind of cut his legs out. And I don't know if you saw this, but on the Andrew Schultz podcast, they actually talked to Bernie. And Bernie admitted that, Democrats are in a way a threat to democracy. Or at least he said, I'm not going to argue against it because of how they treated him. And he just kind of had to fall in line with their platform. And then, how they've done with Kamala and everything else.
Yeah, it's great to say things like no kings. I think both sides would probably agree with that.
Absolutely.
But then we've talked before about find a better martyr. Find a better way to present your cause. No kings is a great soundbite,
right?
But when you've got people burning buildings, burning cars, standing on top of them, waving the flags of foreign countries. That's not a good look. What sense does that make? So that's your message. No kings, but hey, let's wave the flag of a declining, world power, and show that as what we're supporting. What sense does that make? It's baffling.
Yeah, it really is. Whenever I think the thing about it with those protests, especially in California with the looting, the rioting, burning cars, throwing rocks at police and stuff, it's like, that's just not the way to go about it. I think if you want to run a successful like opposition and get the public, what you need is public sentiment. And I think right now most people don't agree with how the protests are going down. Destroying your own city is not the answer. And it also makes you look bad. And especially, like he said, flying foreign flags just gives you the exact opposite look. Like if I was super conservative trying to fund something to make the other side look bad, I would have people in the streets waving another country's flag, burning down cars in America of innocent American civilians, right? That would be like the thing you would do to make the other side look bad. And that's what you're like actively doing. And when it happens, it's fine to a degree. If you're, if you're a liberal, you don't have to agree with that, that way to protest, but you have to condemn it. You can't sit there and just like defend it, essentially. That's what everybody on social media is kind of doing. And it makes you appear like you're backing this, chaos and violence. And it's going to be a hard thing for the average voter. So a lot like what I say about politics is a lot of people get excited or surprised when a lot of people vote for Trump, even though they don't like voice it. But you have to understand that most people just go to work and, they're not going to sit there and argue about every little point online or whatever. So you're not necessarily going to know their view, but then they're going to go and vote. So when you see on the news these people in the street rioting and burning stuff down, there's a lot of people that are sitting there going, I'm not voting for that, right? So you leave them with if there's two bad options, you have one burning down cities and one's not, there's going to be a lot of people that get swayed the other way because of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so what about Iran? That also happened over the weekend.
Yeah,
Israel. How are we feeling about that, World War III?
Oh, they're going to be fine.
Yeah, Israel is, they're war ready, man. They go in straight for the kill. I mean, I heard their first attack, day one, they just went straight in and took out all of the like nuclear leaders day one. Maybe some of the top like war generals and things like that. I think Trump, I heard had a tagline on Twitter. I don't know if it's true or not, but it said that Trump had plans to like kill the supreme leader of Iran, and Trump didn't allow Israel to do it because he thinks like that will destroy any sort of peace like talks.
Yeah, the Israel thing. Anytime Israel is involved with anything, I think we throw too much support sometimes, too much, credibility with the Israel thing. But at the same time, you look at like the people that are, Israel versus Palestine. Those people, pro-Palestine, they're out there protesting this group that went in and killed people that were just out, young kids that were out having a good time at a concert. They go murder and rape and pillage these people, and people jump on their side. And a lot of these people are, hard left that are on this pro-Palestine side. And hop on a plane and go over there with your hard left views. You'll be shot dead, raped, killed within moments of getting off the plane. And I wonder, because people are so tribal these days, with Iran versus Israel, are they going to now jump on the side of Iran? Just because it's Israel,
right?
And like I said, I think Israel stirs up a lot of shit, but pretty much every conflict that they're in over there, they're more on the right. They're more on the side of reason than the others, and it's hard to see. Okay, where does your allegiance stand now? Because Iran is very much the same as Palestine when it comes to hop on a plane and go over there with your hard left views and see how long you make it.
Right. Yeah,
I've seen face isn't covered.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of leftists try to get all high and mighty, saying they're going to go over there and be a reporter on the stuff like Hassan Piker. He said he was going to go over there, but then he backs out and states that it's too dangerous, which is true, but it is dangerous over there, and the people who are defending it seem to kind of be hiding that. You're
not defending freedom. You're not defending liberty.
Right.
When you go over there and take that side. Israel's as close as you're going to get to freedom and liberty over there, which is why we support them and why we back them. You're not going to get anything other than rape and murder in those countries if you're trying to promote liberty, if you're trying to promote freedom of speech. As much as we bitch about it over here, our freedom of speech, which I'm a big fan of, and it does get fucked with too much over here. but go over there and see what it looks like to really not have freedom of speech. Try and say the things that you're saying over here, and see how long you last.
Yeah, I tried to take a kind of neutral approach on the whole thing because I know like there's so much, there's a lot of religious context. There's a lot of, just historical context where, I think both sides can go back over the years and have, what we could play whataboutism all day for thousands of years, right? This has been something that has, kind of always existed in some form of another in the area. And I think it's easy to pick sides, and it's easy to say, like, point fingers and name all of the bad things that the other side has done, for sure. But I think the only thing is, at some point there has to be peace. And you either, like, you have to be able to coexist and draw a line and both be able to accept that line. And I think historically that just hasn't happened, obviously. And I think that's an extremely difficult ask, with all things considered. But, that's the only thing that's really going to stop it. And, to kind of pin one side as the good guy or bad guy is tough because there's, there are things on each side that are just like kind of they're indefensible, right? And so it's hard. It's a hard thing. It's a very tough topic, and there's a lot of people that have a lot of emotional ties to it, which I understand. For me personally, I always look at things from a United States standpoint and what we can do for our citizens, for the betterment of our country. And I think we have a ton of problems in our country that need to be addressed. And in my opinion, I take kind of a founding father, not isolationist, but kind of a, free trade with all, but, not necessarily binding, alliances with anyone where we're blindly supporting them no matter what, and keeping money for ourselves, at home and defending our own country from like direct attack, as opposed to going and getting involved and trying to police the world. Like, I think Ron Paul has a good policy on this where he's like, we don't need to be the policeman of the world. And especially when we have a maxed out credit card, $37 trillion in debt, and we're sitting here funding all these other countries' wars. And for what? It's like, I don't see the gain for us necessarily, other than just trying to stop the violence, which I think Trump is so far has been doing an okay job of trying to do that. Obviously, there's a lot of things out of his control, in which case, hey, if Israel really wants a war with Iran, they're free to do that. They're a free country, right? They can do what they want to do. They don't have to listen to us. But I think he's tried to do that. But I do think ultimately he sides with Israel, and I think he's going to join the war, which I would personally disagree with.
Do we think this is World War III?
I think it's only World War III if everyone decides it's our business too.
Right.
I've got a similar view to what you said. Put your own mask on first. Let's fix our shit first. And I'm not of the opinion that there will ever be peace there. I don't think there ever will be. I think history shows that there never will be. And for us to try and bring peace to them brings violence here.
True.
I just don't see it. I wish there could be, but it's Jews versus Muslims versus Christians. It's the oldest, Cowboys versus Eagles that there is.
Right.
I don't see there ever being peace there, and I think let's fix our shit.
Right.
And if they want to fight, let them fight.
Right.
If they start jacking with us, okay. If they start jacking with our interests, okay. Let's make it a parking lot.
Right. Yeah, and I noticed like in the world too, everybody kind of looks at the United States to solve everyone's problems, and I'm like, man, we've done that, and I mean, to a degree, it's been good. We've helped a lot of countries, but at the same time, look at where it's gotten us. Where we're now at a point where we're going bankrupt, and it's like we're just going to keep throwing this stuff on a credit card. I just don't think it makes a lot of sense. That's the one thing that makes me lean between the two parties. I think it's kind of two bad options, but if anything, I would lean towards Trump, specifically with the Elon thing, which I love to talk about later. But, Doge, I think, is a good thing in terms of just cutting down the size of the government, hopefully reducing our deficit to being a balanced budget, and then hopefully a surplus or something, or GDP growth to like kind of get down our debt, because we're paying like $1 trillion a year just in debt interest payments, and I think that is like the most critical problem we have, and then the inflation that comes behind that. And yeah, we're funding all these wars. I just think like funding all these wars and causing all these problems, and going back to the No King, or not even the No Kings protest, but the LA riots for liberals want open borders now, which open borders is an interesting topic because there's a lot of libertarians that do actually believe in open borders. It's kind of a split issue within the libertarian, party. But there's a lot of libertarians that believe in open borders because they believe in like individual sovereignty and able to like travel freely, trade freely, things like these. And I think those are good things. However, in the society that we live in, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to have open borders because, like you said, with Iran and our involvement in the Middle East, it creates a lot of enemies. So when you have open borders, you can't have this big interventionist military style where you're going over there and you're creating all these enemies everywhere around the world, and then you have an open border at home. It's very unsafe. And just from a national security standpoint, it's just unrealistic to do that. So if we're going to have that imperialistic military, industrial complex, things like that, an open border absolutely makes no sense, because we have too many enemies. And then another thing that makes no sense is having a big welfare state. Under the libertarian ideology, I can see how an open border would make sense because you are not going to be intervening in other people's stuff, so you're not going to have all these foreign enemies. And then you're also not going to have this big welfare state for people to come in and benefit off of without necessarily contributing to the taxes. I know they do. I know illegal immigrants do. But the point is having this big welfare system that can be strained by a bunch of people coming in that haven't necessarily paid into it over time, it just doesn't make sense. And that's why we've one of the reasons that we've dug ourselves into such a big hole, those two big aspects.
Yeah, you hear with libertarian, you hear big L or little L. I'm not sure if you've heard that before.
A little bit.
I'm a little L guy. I like a lot of their philosophy, not all of it. I'm definitely not an open border person.
Same.
But I do believe that we should have a good, clear path to citizenship.
Same.
And I do believe that our country was founded on people fleeing oppressive governments.
Yep.
And we have to find a way to give them a path to citizenship, a good, clear, legal path to citizenship.
Right.
And it's kind of like you look at what Obama did. I actually liked what he did with the DACA program.
Same.
You've got a lot of people that were brought here as kids that don't know anyone back in their home country. The answer, they're good, productive citizens here.
Right.
And maybe not technically citizens, but we're all they know. And they've been here, they're 40, 50 years old now, and they came here when they were 10.
Right.
And you tell them, go back to your country. This is their country.
Right.
They are paying taxes. And we keep moving the goalposts because we elect different leaders that change that path to citizenship.
Right.
We've got to make it easier for them. They shouldn't be living in fear. As soon as we push them into the underground,
right,
that's when they're breaking the law. And most of those people are good, hardworking people, and a lot of them are doing jobs that Americans won't do.
Right.
And if you really want to affect that illegal immigration problem, go after the people that are hiring them. That's where you cut off the reason for them to come here. Now, I don't necessarily think that's the answer either. I think give them a path to citizenship. But it makes more sense if you're going to go after the illegal immigrants that are busting their ass to be good, productive people. In my opinion, it makes more sense to go after the people that are hiring them.
True.
Take away the marketplace. But what do we do then?
Right.
What do we do then for those jobs?
Right.
It's obviously there's not an easy answer. It would have been solved by now.
Right.
But we know that the answer is not open up the borders for everybody to just walk right through.
Right. Yeah, and the good thing is I think most people believe that. Most people acknowledge that, you can't have open borders. But I think I agree with everything you said. I think DACA is good. I think I'm personally an advocate for H-1B visas. All work and student visas are good. I think, increasing the amount of like immigration judges. I believe we give about 800,000 a year of citizenship, and I think that number could be increased absolutely. So I would advocate for all of those things. And I think, I have a bunch of friends who are immigrants, legal immigrants. I have a buddy who came through with DACA, and he's one of the most American people I know. He got a citizenship pretty recently. He's a great entrepreneur. He might be a good guest to have on the podcast in the future and talk about these things. I like to, whenever I have friends, I like to pick their brain about these things before just forming an opinion, because there's a lot of stuff in the system that, most people just don't know, right? There's a lot of difficulty in the system and things like that. And I think a lot of people, if you spoke to people personally, you would have, more of an open mind on some of the stuff. But with all that being said, open borders and illegal immigration, where somebody is literally, making this big travel across the border and, actively violating the law here, and then being surprised or upset when they're being deported. It's like, I don't think if I entered another country, like if I went to Japan and like, not even just like, okay, I could have a lot of sympathy for somebody who has like a student visa. Okay, I go to Japan on a student visa and I'm trying to get citizenship and I overstay my visa. I think that is one thing, right? And that's an understandable thing that we could work on that process too. I think extending visas and stuff should be way easier. Like, you don't necessarily have to get a citizenship, but if you're here for good reason, you don't necessarily have to be a citizen, even if it takes long, but they could still be here. But if I went to Japan on a visa and I overstayed my visa, that would be one thing. But if I got on a boat and just hopped on the boat and went to Japan and then they found me, I would not be shocked if they sent me home. Like, I would feel like that is a light punishment personally.
Yeah.
And I would expect that. And I would expect that if I went anywhere. So for me to have that mentality to that's okay, or like that we should just say that we can't have that law of having a border, to me, that's insane. And it makes no sense. And at the end of the day, people will say, well, yeah, but you want more legal immigration too, but then you say it's not, you can't do that. And I'm like, yeah, but even if let's say we double the number, let's say we're letting 1 million people in a year legally. If we double that number when we make it 2 million, well, there's still going to be a line. There's still going to be people we're going to have to say no to. So under your ideology, if that number still isn't enough, are they still allowed to hop the border and come over illegally? And then at that point, if you say no, we can tell them no then and, ship them back or whatever. How is that not the same thing as Trump's doing? Because, the way we need to go about it is change the law and fund the immigration judges, do it the right way. Don't be in the street burning it down and waving Mexican flags. That's not the way to go about it. And saying that we should just have open borders or illegal immigration is it's just a bizarre take. I don't understand it. I don't know how we've gotten here. And if your opinion is just that we should have open borders, fine, but then fight for that in Congress through voting and the republic process we have, and do it that way.
We're really good at the extremes these days.
Right.
We're really good at the vilification of people who, I know that if I were, living somewhere where I could make it to America, and I had a family, and we all risked death by violent regimes, by, violent drug cartels, and my only shot at my children being safe was to come here illegally, I would do it.
Of course.
And I think everyone would.
Of course.
And I think it's wrong to vilify those people.
Right.
And I think our extremes vilify those people these days. Our extremes say that everyone that's here illegally is a villain. Mm-hmm. And on the other side of that is, saying that everyone that comes here illegally is some angelic oppressed person, when some of them are MS-13. Some of them are horrible gang members.
Right.
Some of them are here to do bad things and live in the shadows, and take advantage of our welfare state.
Right.
That is also true. It's sad that we live in this, country of, like we were talking about earlier, what was it that we were saying earlier? our where we get our news.
Right.
You're either one or the other.
Right.
There's
Tribalism.
no real middle. It's we've witnessed the death of common sense.
Yep.
It's the tribalism. That's what we were talking about. The echo
Right.
chambers. This tribalism. We're not allowed to think for ourselves. If you're a Democratic, member of Congress, well, these days you're automatically a pedophile.
Right.
If you're a Republican member of Congress, you're automatically a racist.
Right. Right.
That's the way that we paint people now, with no room for, oh, you know what? They've just got an opposing viewpoint. It's like the Bill Maher thing with him going to dinner with Trump.
Right. Right.
We have to be able to sit down and have a conversation.
Absolutely.
We can't, as Bill Maher has said, when it comes time for the holidays, we can't say fuck you to our family. I'm never talking to you again because you voted for Trump. That doesn't make any sense. We are becoming the Middle East when we do that. We are becoming these extremist regimes when we do that.
Right.
When we think that a great way to protest is to burn cars and wave foreign flags, we are doing that.
Right.
It's the death of common sense, and we're all witnessing it, and to be a part of it is pretty disgusting.
Right. Yeah, and I think with most people, and this is why I was talking about earlier, people going and voting, and then, they don't really, not everybody talks about politics day to day. Like most people I know, they don't talk about it. If you brought something up, they would just be quiet about it. They don't really care. A lot of them still vote, and then they have a view that they're not necessarily willing to argue about, but they'll go vote it. And what I've learned is, like, a lot of people are actually very much libertarian, agree with us, or just kind of independent, where there's certain things, like, you might have one side that's just like, oh, absolutely no welfare. One side, like, wants socialism, which historically socialism's never worked, and having no welfare can be pretty brutal, right? But some people will just be like, well, maybe we don't have socialism, but we have, schools have kids' lunches provided for them. That doesn't seem like a crazy cost. We could afford to do that. Just little things like that. And I think, that's like classic liberalism, which I think is totally fair. So I think a lot of people are actually a lot closer to the center on issues, or like with immigration, people will just kind of make it out to be like, oh, every immigrant, no immigration at all this stuff. When in reality, that may be a few % of the population thinks something like that, which is a very silly take in my opinion. Or people that are just like straight up open borders, no law at all. And it's like, okay, that's very silly. But I also believe that most, liberals and leftists even, well, maybe not leftists, but liberals don't actually believe in open borders. They just kind of have the opinion that, like, hey, the way we're going about the immigration is wrong, and we could do better and we could do more and let more people in legally and give them the way, because it really isn't a great way for it now, which I think is fair. But the biggest takeaway I have, especially with the recent events, is just how it gets portrayed, and how, it's one thing for people to be rioting in the streets. That's fine. There's going to be lunatics of all, it's like January 6th. People always ask me about January 6th, and I'm like, I don't agree with January 6th. I think those are a bunch of lunatics. I don't think they should have been pardoned. I don't agree. I think that's like an extreme thing. You shouldn't be doing that, right? But I think that's important, is you have to be able to condemn it. Otherwise, you're basically supporting it. If I sit here and I start making excuses for January 6th, you're going to think of me as somebody who supports that type of behavior and thinking that's okay, when it's not. But if you're an extremist and you're going into the tribalism, you're going to be sitting there going, yeah, January 6th was good. They were all patriots. No, but then also on the flip side, you got the LA riots. But then when the National Guard, they riot for 3 days, they're looting stores, they're burning cars, they're doing all this stuff. And then Trump goes, hey, I'm going to bring in the National Guard. He's not bringing in the National Guard randomly. There were just the No Kings protests. They didn't call the National Guard on any of those. There was no violence. There was no nothing. But that's because the protests were peaceful. As soon as they turned non-peaceful, yeah, you got to get riot control in order to protect the people who also have a right to exist in this free country and not be at threat and in danger on the street, or have their business robbed or their car burned. Do they not have a right to that? So it's the government's role, actually. I'm a libertarian, but I think there are some essential roles of the government. One of those is to keep the peace among the citizens. Otherwise, I could just kill you And what happens? Oh, that's fine. Just because somebody feels like that's fine, or you don't want me to be arrested a certain way or whatever. No, there has to be law and order, and somebody has to do it, and that's the government. And so it's just an extreme. Like, we just go from one extreme to the other, and it doesn't make any sense. I think most people, though, they fall in the middle somewhere.
It's the crazy hypocrisy of the violence that is a byproduct of this tribalism, where it's okay if it's your guy. It's okay if it's your team.
Right. You're just going to defend everything.
Yeah, it's like we'd spoken about this kid Carmelo Anthony.
Right.
Black kid, stabbed a guy, killed him at a high school. And, everybody goes straight to the comments when you're reading the stories on online. And you see a lot of the same thing. Half the people are saying he's a murderer, piece of shit, murderer, this is what you get, thug. Lots of it gets racial. And then the other half is saying, he was put in that position. He was made to have to defend himself because he had been a victim of racism. He had been a victim of bullying. He had been a victim of all these things. And you've got your tribes. They're dug in. And, the right is saying, how can you make a hero out of this kid? He's a murderer. Who in the hell would ever make a hero out of this kid? And then you look back, not too long ago, Kyle Rittenhouse. Okay, well, now we see the hypocrisy of tribalism. We see a kid who, went out and killed people. He went looking for a fight. Had his weapon with him, just like Carmelo Anthony did. Had his weapon with him, waiting for people to pick on him, just like Carmelo Anthony did. He came there ready to do something about it. And he did something about it. But he's a hero. How about they're both murderers? How about, they both belong in jail? Let's cut the hypocritical bullshit out. And, I think most people in the middle would agree with that. But we're so tribal now, we can't see that. People need to pick better martyrs. And you hear me say that all the time. People need better martyrs. There are better examples out there
right.
of people that portray these great ideals. There are better examples than murderers.
Right.
Let's go with those.
Right. Yeah, it is the tribalism and the echo chambers and all that stuff. Everybody just assume. My thing with a lot of these stories, like, even the Carmelo Anthony case, I like to just kind of let the facts come out before I kind of make a determination. Even bringing up the Kyle Rittenhouse case, I think your take is fair. Me, like, seeing it when it happened in the news reports, they made it sound like, oh, this guy went to a BLM riot with an AR-15 and just started lighting people up. That's kind of that was kind of the CNN headline. And when I heard that, I'm like, you feel sick. You're like, wow, that's terrible. Like, this is a terrible person. Like, obviously. But then the case or the court hearings come out and you learn new information. And it's like, well, he traveled across state lines. He had a gun. He was there, like you said, kind of looking for a fight potentially. People can make their own judgments on that stuff for sure. But a couple interesting facts is, like, every single person that he shot did attack them, and also none of them were black. So the way, for me on that case, I'm kind of split. I would say he defended himself. I'm always going to try to side with the people that defend themselves to a degree. But I would say, like, he definitely isn't innocent by any means. Going there, having the gun, especially being underage, he's already broke multiple laws that hold, like, he should be held accountable to some degree for that, at least, right? But, my biggest takeaway from that whole thing is when I first heard it, it was portrayed one way, and it was like he's, terrible, terrible person. But then when you hear the facts, it's like, okay, there's definitely wrongdoing on his side, but it's not what it was originally portrayed to be. And I think with the Carmelo Anthony case, it's hard to really make a distinction on it just because, all the facts haven't come out. I'll try to wait to see about that. But it is very sad and very interesting, like you said, how it becomes this big like racial divide and people just side with it just purely based off of, just the identity politics behind it. And I'm like, look, take the facts of the case and be able to say right and wrong. And if you can do that, you can hold that to every case the same way. And if you can do that, I can respect your opinion. But if you just come in and you say, oh, well, Kyle Rittenhouse is innocent because he's white or whatever, or guilty because he's white, either way, or, same thing with Carmelo Anthony, vice versa. So make a determination based on the actual facts of the case.
Sure.
And I think like most people say they agree with that, but then you see how it happens. And another example, like with the Carmelo Anthony case, it was like a week or two later, some short amount of time later, there was this, I don't know her name, some white lady. There's like a viral video on the internet where there was like this black child who like, I don't know what he was doing there at a park or something. He was kind of playing with her purse or maybe stealing something, or she thought he was stealing something. I don't know. But she ends up calling him the N-word, and it's like he's a little kid, and like, it's just, that's so wrong, right?
And that GoFundMe raised so much money, too.
Right, in the
It's
GoFundMe.
crazy.
So that's the thing is like Carmelo Anthony, people are kind of assuming he's guilty based off of the evidence people have seen. So, okay, fair.
Sure.
But given the information we've seen, it looks probably guilty. But then he's raising $1 million or whatever it is on a GoFundMe just based off of the national news cycle. And then the same thing vice versa with this white lady. She's raising a bunch of money. And I'm like, what are we doing? Both sides, it's just so dumb. Like, we're just supporting people who are doing bad things just because it supports our side. And then it gives ammunition to the other side to be like, see, and it's like, you're right. Like, see, like it's bad, so.
I look at Carmelo and Rittenhouse as two kids who went looking for a fight and found one.
Fair.
And they both showed up with weapons looking for a fight, and they found one. And they both killed people. And, I agree that we don't know all the facts because one news station will give you one set from their tribe, and the other will give you the other set from the other tribe.
True.
And I guarantee they come down upon the lines of the politics.
Right. Every time.
Every time.
And even before all the facts come out, they're just on that side. And I'm like, and then it's crazy.
It's ridiculous. And we can't just step back and use common sense.
Right.
Yeah.
What else you got, dog?
Military parade that just happened. How did that go?
Went really well.
Oh, yeah, you were there?
Yeah.
You were driving the tank, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I personally think, I do think that stuff is a waste of money, but, I just don't get so upset about that. I think we have a lot of huge wasteful spending, and I think to get so emotional about it, it's just another thing. Like, we're talking about tribalism and just how, like, everything becomes so sensationalized. Like, it's just the daily news cycle. Oh, we're upset that Trump's holding a military rally and everything. And to me, I'm just like, man, like, do I have an opinion? Sure. But is it that serious to me? Not really. Like, that's my opinion. And it's like, is it a hill I'm going to die on? Absolutely not. Because my thing would just be that it's a waste of money. I don't really care. Like, I don't mind celebrating the military. I think they deserve all the recognition. Should we spend as many millions as we did? And could that money go to better use? Even just increasing the fund for the VA and everything. Sure. That would be my take. But, like, am I going to go and riot or protest or whatever? No.
Yeah, I can see the side of it that, we didn't really ever have military parades before Trump. We didn't have these. And you do look at the kind of leaders around the world that have these. And some would say that it's only these, fascist dictators that do that. And that's really not true. France doesn't have fascist dictators. And they do this. But I think there are worse things that you could spend money on than celebrating the military. I do think, as you said, I think they deserve the recognition. My libertarian side also says it's kind of a waste of money, kind of like flyovers at, professional sports games.
Right.
I think it's money that could be better spent, like you said, the VA, or increasing, even if it's just an incremental amount, increasing the amount of money these soldiers make. I'm okay spending money on our military or to celebrate our military. I wish that it went less to bullshit and more to the soldiers' pockets.
Right.
We spend it on outdated, antiquated, gear that is, bullshit. It's useless. But we keep these guys locked into a state of poverty. If anyone deserves to make a good income, it's these guys.
Right.
But we'd rather put the money toward bullshit. So does our government spend money on a lot of bullshit? Absolutely. So I can see us spending it on worse things. I'm fine with the military parade. I do like those guys getting the recognition. I just wish that we could show them recognition in their pocketbook.
Right. Agreed.
And is it not like a intimidation tactic for other countries too? Like, hey, here's what we can do. Like, be careful messing with us.
I don't see that. I maybe that's part of the.
It could be.
The
I think
idea
that's what
behind it.
like North Korea does, because they'll have like their
Yeah.
1,000,000-man march or whatever, and like
Agreed.
that. It looks kind of cool until you just think about how most warfare is just drones now. So like I don't know if it really, I don't know, but
Yeah, I think China does it now, but with giant drone shows, and that's how they kind of showcase things.
right, and they'll float. Well, we float our boats around, and it's just like
Right.
I think that's a show of force because we're actually like, hey, we're actually out here. But, we have a lot of wasteful spending. I think, like you said, it could be worse. It could be better. I think you could say that about pretty much anything. There's going to be so many people that agree or disagree. I don't think it's like the end of the world. I don't think it's worth protesting. Definitely not. And I think like having that sensationalist mindset, it kind of waters down the actual issues. Because I think there will be times where like Trump does something that I'm like, should this not get more attention? But it really flies over because people we hear that he's a fascist every day. So if he did something that was actually kind of fascist, we would just be like, oh, they're just screaming fascism again.
Yeah.
Like you've literally just taken like you could literally call Trump a racist and nobody blinks. He could probably say something really racist and people would just be like, oh, you're just taking it out of context again, because that's all they do. And it's like, I mean, there's truth to that. Like, and you just can't cry wolf over and over. And I think that's been the most damaging thing. I think the media, and people think there's this Illuminati. I don't know. There could be. I could definitely see, pushing towards a certain direction for whatever malicious intent. Who knows? But I think realistically, just looking at news networks and how they're incentivized, they are incentivized for clicks. They are incentivized for headlines and getting people to watch. That's it. Point blank period. They want the views. And when you want the views, everything has to be sensationalized. So you're going to find the most compelling story. It's going to be something bad. You're just trying to piss people off, get them upset, and that's it. And you need to find one of those every day in order to keep people watching. And then you got a guy who's as polarizing and as famous as Trump. He's the easiest target. So every day they're just going to be talking about Trump, and it works to his favor. He plays that like a fiddle, honestly. He does it on purpose. Like when he's like, oh, Trump, 2028. And everybody loses their minds. And I'm like, y'all don't see the game he's playing? Like he's playing with you, and you don't even know you're a pawn on the board. You don't even know you're on. Like,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
but I think some of that is he's playing with us, and some of it he's testing. Some of it he's testing us.
Yeah, dipping his toes in the
Yeah,
water.
yeah. I do think he would have no problem changing the Constitution.
If he could.
Yeah,
If he could, but it would be too much.
we'll see.
You need what, 2/3? What is it for a constitutional amendment? Isn't it 2/3 of Congress? Something like that. I don't know. It's like it's a big, and like, or there's like, I can't remember all the rules to it. It's like some amount of states have to approve it. It takes a lot. It needs like an overwhelming amount of support in order to change the Constitution.
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult. And so I think he's well aware, and I don't even know if he would want to. But even though, I just think he's playing with people, and like
He's done a lot of things that seem like there's no way in hell somebody could do that. I don't put it past him. I think he's gonna. I think he may not outwardly try himself, but he will float the idea, as he already has.
right.
And I think his people will try.
Yeah. So an amendment takes 2/3 vote in both House of Representatives and the Senate.
Right.
and then once it's through that, it goes to each state, and it requires a 3/4 approval by all of the states.
Yeah.
Currently,
So
38 states would have to.
That's
approve
if you
as
do
well.
it the traditional way. Who's to say that he couldn't?
Yeah,
you know,
but
I'm just saying he's done things that
yeah,
are surprising.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I agree.
And what's his name? The Breitbart guy, or was it Breitbart? Who's the guy that, like everybody, that was a member of his, most esteemed advisory team, and then they hated each other, and now they're friends again. What's his name?
Sure.
Steve
the guy that
Bannon.
looks like a burn victim. Yeah.
Yep.
Steve Bannon. He looks like a,
He looks
he
pretty
suffered
wild.
fetal alcohol syndrome and then was caught in a, burn chamber. He's apparently got away. He thinks he has a path to make that happen. Him and Stephen Miller both.
I would bet money nothing happens. And, I just think my point, though, even wasn't to double down on that issue, though, like Canada, right? When he first got elected, he started talking about annexing Canada, Greenland, Panama.
Right.
And, I think the thing about Trump, and everybody went crazy. And I remember there were TikToks where these liberals were crying. And I sent
He
Levi.
loves to drive him crazy.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. He does it on purpose. And so
Sure.
maybe not everything. Sure, there's going to
Right.
be some things. And this is part of it. Like when you set enough traps or enough bait and people react to it and then people hear it and they get numb to it, then when you slide by with the actual thing, so this is what he does. He's a wild card. He'll go in, he'll be spontaneous, he'll say a lot of things, and then what he actually wants is something way lesser. I think that's actually like a smart tactic, like in a way, because what he does is he says the extreme. He opens with the extreme, and he makes it tied to some other incentive.
It's the art of the deal.
Right. And it's like, so he'll tie something to some other incentive, and then he'll come in with these guns blazing, but then he'll be like, okay, we can take it to the negotiation table, and then immediately the country will just offer the thing that he was probably wanting anyways.
And a
It's
lot
like-
of it is a brilliant tactic.
Right. And so you see it working and you're like, okay, it was like, what country was it? There was a country that wasn't accepting the immigrants that were being flown, the illegal immigrants that he was flying back. They wouldn't accept the planes. And this was like a week into him being president or something. And then he said, okay, fine. We're putting 50% tariffs on that country for everything.
And they said, come on.
And it doesn't really
We're clearing the runway.
Yeah, it doesn't really affect us because we do import stuff from them, and it will cost more a little bit, and it'll, we'll feel it a little bit. But we don't import that much from them. Whereas their exports we are a large buyer from them. They need to sell to us. So it's like the leverage there is insane. So he just goes, okay, fine. Y'all don't have to. And he just does that. And then they're like, hold on, So they come to the table. The president of that country started using his own plane to fly to help out. And I'm like,
And now they're buddies.
yeah, and it's interesting. It's just interesting how that works. And people just, they hate on them. And I'm like, I definitely see a lot of it. But I think when we just sensationalize everything, it waters down the stuff that is true. And there is a lot that is true. It's just hard to gauge. It's hard to see it. It's hard to tell where everything is, where he stands on stuff. It's very unclear anytime. It's just, you don't know what's going to happen. So there were people on TikTok crying about him invading Canada. And I was like, I guarantee you, I would bet anything. I would bet my literal life that we do not invade Canada.
Sure. Of course we're not going
Of course not. But there's people on TikTok that literally they see a CNN article that just plays into that narrative, and then people literally believe it wholeheartedly, and they're crying because that hurts them emotionally. And I'm like, are you guys serious? It's not happening. You guys need to look at things from a different lens and just see the chess moves instead of just how you feel about, assuming something's going to happen and then being emotionally tied to it.
That was the issue. That was the single issue that made Miley completely speechless.
Yeah, what do you think about
Miley,
that?
what do you... And she still won't talk about it.
Yeah, she's been devastated since.
She has been. She's in her bubble. She's in
So sorry, Miley.
She's in her echo chamber.
Yeah.
Yep.
This episode is brought to you by our favorite hilarious clothing brand, World of Stupid. Rock their absurdly funny tees and gear that'll have everyone laughing. Check them out at worldofstupid.com and use code INTERESTING for an exclusive discount.
So speaking of people falling out with Trump, it happened 2 weeks ago, which is basically a lifetime in today's cycle. But Elon and Trump That recently happened.
Did something
Elon,
happen?
Elon called him a pedophile.
He's been in his echo chamber.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Didn't hear about it.
Yeah. No.
Miley didn't tell you about it?
God, I think you were the one that. Were you the one that texted me first? I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, right when it
yeah,
happened, I
yeah.
started spamming everybody on my phone. I was
Yeah.
like, it's happening. Because, me and Levi, we talked about this too. Because, I'm a big Elon guy. And whenever they first, Trump has fallings out with quite literally every single person. At some point,
Yeah.
they usually get back together and it's fine.
Yeah.
Because he's a very, he's just strategic. It's not personal to him. He just plays, he plays with the pieces that are in front of him. He's a business guy. And so he can, even with Elon and Trump, people are like, oh, they'll never be able to make up because, Elon said he's on Epstein's list. I think they will because Trump doesn't take stuff too personally.
It seemed like they were friends the next day.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, Elon was, praising his policies the next day on
Right.
Twitter. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it almost makes me feel like it was a little bit of a show because, he was just exiting Doge and, I think he kind of wants to separate himself from it. So, what better way to prove that than to just say the most crazy thing you could say about somebody, right? And so I think there's maybe, that would be my conspiracy is maybe there's a little bit of that, but I think they'll make up. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is just how short the news cycles are because that's
Right.
think about how crazy that is. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, just called the most powerful man in the world, the president of the United States, a pedophile. And it was only talked about for 2 days.
Yeah.
And then everybody's like, yeah, it's just Twitter.
Well, my biggest takeaway was, fucking listen to what Elon is saying. I'm not, what he was saying was that bill, Trump brings on these Doge guys to perform a task, and they do. And they got rid of a lot of bullshit. And, the libertarians were saying, we'll see if it really sticks when it comes to the military.
Right.
We'll see what happens.
Right.
Because that's where the fat is.
Right.
And you can, you listen to what Ron Paul used to say, which was you can knock 20% off of that budget, no problem.
Right.
And it won't affect our defense capabilities at all.
Right.
Because there is an easy to find 20% of bullshit in that budget.
True.
And what did we do? We increased the budget.
Right.
That's what Elon was saying.
Right.
You took all of this hard work that we did. Elon risks his, his street cred, his business cred. He risks, the income of his businesses.
Right.
He puts everything on the line to be a part of this. Mm-hmm. And he got fucked.
Right.
He really did get fucked.
Yeah, they took his savings and then added some and increased the deficit even more.
So Doge, it was a great idea. And it ended up being bullshit. And
Right.
that's exactly what Elon was saying. And I say good for him for standing up for that.
Right.
He took a libertarian stance on that.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with Elon. I side with Elon on it. I think we need to obviously trim down. I mean, I think not even that I want to. Obviously, I want to as a libertarian. I'd like to have the smallest federal government possible where it only has the roles that are necessary for a federal government. Everything else should be returned to the states and then as close to the people as possible. That way people can have the biggest voice and biggest determinant on their own life and how they are being governed individually. So I think the federal government should be as small as physically possible. But obviously, we are at a point where it's not even just what we want. We literally have to. We have $37 trillion in debt, and we're paying over $1 trillion a year just in interest on that debt. So this is unsustainable, and this is only increasing every year because our annual deficit is over $2 trillion a year. So he comes in, he cut off $200 billion, which is great. It's a big number. At first he was trying to say $1 trillion, and then so far it's $200 billion. They're still going, so we'll see. But it doesn't help you really if you just take that $200 billion and you just put it through Congress and reapprove it through Congress again, and then you just add any sort of savings plus then some to the military. If I was president, what I would do, because really, the president doesn't form the bills and everything. They can kind of influence it. But what I would say is I'm vetoing anything that comes across my desk that doesn't have a balanced budget.
Yeah.
Point blank. So you better cut what you got to cut. And if that's whatever percent across the board, everything gets cut that much, cool. But we have to do it eventually, or we go bankrupt. And there's no, like, people are like, oh, you're going to cut Social Security, you're going to cut Medicare, you're going to cut Medicaid, you're going to cut military, you're going to cut this or that. Here's the thing. We either cut some or it cuts itself entirely eventually. And that eventually is arriving quicker than you think. That's my take on it. We have to. It's gone past, like, okay, I would like the government to be like this. Some people would like, okay, maybe this, welfare, this, that, whatever. Cool. It's got past that point. Now we have to. And that's what Elon's saying. Like, we're going on a straight path to bankruptcy. And none of the politicians care. Because if you're the politician that cuts, there's going to be so many people that hate you, and it's almost a career suicide. So you can't cut, or you get the most violent mob. You see what happened with Doge, right, and Elon's cars and everything. The left, when they don't get their way, they get violent. And I don't know. I just think we have to, and he was the only guy who was willing to step up to do it, and I understand his frustration with how it played out.
The way that we increase the military budget makes me sick. We give in to this military-industrial complex, and we completely screw the soldiers. These guys that need help for their PTSD. These guys that need help for working the burn pits. These guys that need real medical help. These guys that live in poverty, trying to support their families. And we say, hey, you know what, we're going to increase the military budget, and we're not going to give shit to the soldiers. But they're going to wave the flag and have their military parade saying, we love our soldiers. Bullshit. You're not taking care of them. That's the stuff that pisses me off with that.
Right. Yeah, and I think, too, with the big, beautiful bill, they put in a lot of funding for some good things. Like, I think the tax cuts are great. I think the, no tax on tips. There's a lot of things you could point at. I think the increase in funding for the military, I disagree with increasing the funding. But they have some good things in there. Like, I think the Golden Dome and the Space Force funding is very good. However, I just think the way it should be funded should come out of money that's not as
money that's wasted.
Right. I think we're adding money to it is unnecessary, because we could just restructure the way the current funding is and even reduce it, like you said, or just restructure it and keep it the way it is and segment some amount of money to go towards those things, which I think those are great things. That's a path to the future military. But we would have to pull back on some of the old stuff that we do that is maybe not as effective. Like, I think we have a ton of, like Ron Paul talks about this, we have a ton of bases everywhere across the world. And I think we can have some for sure, but we have like hundreds. And I don't think we need that. And especially now, I don't think a lot of the wars are fought via boots on the ground. And I think having boots on the ground isn't like the best way to play it anyways, in terms of like saving, military lives. So, drone warfare, and like if we get space lasers and things like this, I think like that would be great, and that would be the way to do it. And could even be cheaper ultimately. And obviously way more effective and less lives lost, everything like that. But I think structure the money to where you're not increasing the budget and increasing our deficit, because we just can't do it.
If you agree with Doge, which I agree with a lot of it, then why can't you use it on the military?
Right. But we
why is it a good idea everywhere but the military?
Yeah, but going into the Trump admin, we knew Republicans weren't going to go back on that part. Like, that was known for sure, which is an unfortunate.
And that's unfortunate.
It's an unfortunate truth. But I knew that going into it, too. I knew they were talking a little bit about it. I know Elon talked about it, because Elon wants to go into the Pentagon and clean it up.
Yeah.
He wants to. But I know they shut that down day one, because Trump's real quiet about that. He's going to accept all the good things that Elon does and the things he agrees with. He's like, cool. But when Elon says something he disagrees with, he's just going to be quiet and just be like, okay, like, that's fine. We can disagree, but it's not going to happen.
It's unfortunate.
Yep.
Gotcha. Well, that's kind of everything on my list for the current events. I want to open it up to you guys and see, is there anything else that you guys want to touch on?
Yeah, I was going to see if you want to talk about the Pentagon pizza tracker with the war and.
Yeah, if you guys don't know about this, there's something called Pentagon Pizza Tracker, and I have no way to see if I can show it to you.
I think this is. I'm so glad you guys told me about this.
Yeah, we can just explain it.
Yeah, have you heard about this?
Just when you guys told me about it.
Yeah, gotcha. Let me pull it up real quick, because I also want to see what's going on right now with it, because there's always new developments in it. Not cited X. Let me get it on my phone.
Yeah, so basically it's every time there's a conflict that's coming up, you can go and look. There's a Twitter account, I believe, and it's the Pentagon Pizza Tracker, and it'll show like a Domino's and like other pizza places near the White House and the Pentagon where the traffic will increase heavily, like a significant increase in traffic at a certain time on a certain day. And shortly after that, there will be some big thing, some big event, whether it's Israel striking Iran or who knows, just any sort of event. Like you'll see that the pizza needs at the Pentagon go up, and then all of a sudden, a few hours later, something big happens.
Yeah,
It's the new Pizzagate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Last night they were kind of off the charts, and so I'm kind of curious to keep an eye on the news.
Yeah, keep an eye on the news. Something big happens today.
Yeah, and the X account is called at Pin Pizza Report, and they usually share graphs. Maybe on the next episode I can kind of share my screen and kind of show what this looks like. But it's crazy. There's good evidence with it that it fully supports these pizza chains, especially like if it's right before they close, the graphs will be off the charts.
A pizza predictor is hilarious.
Yeah, and yeah, it'll be off the charts if something's about to drop. Like last night, at Texas Tire, they were completely off the charts like an hour before they closed, because I guess everybody's just they're hungry and they know they're going to be there all night, so yeah, they order pizzas. It's amazing.
Anyways, you want to order some pizza?
Oh, yeah.
What do you think, Miley?
Oh, yeah. I'm in. Pepperoni, jalapeno, bacon.
Miley hasn't been eating too much since everything's gone down.
Yeah, she's watching her weight. She's had a lot of other stuff in her mouth.
Speaking of which, did y'all hear that Diddy laced his baby oil? Or they found 10,000 bottles of baby oil, but apparently it was lace. This was news to me.
Like, what's in it?
GHB, which
is that confirmed though? Or is this just something? Is this fake news that I'm getting?
Good question. I've been hearing a lot about
and
it.
Where can I get some? That's awesome.
It's custom. I think it's custom made. I think you got to get it from Diddy.com.
So top result on Google's NBC. Sean Diddy Combs' baby oil was allegedly laced with the date rape drug GHB.
Damn. Well, I don't want to
Still
lace with
allegedly.
that.
Crazy.
All right. Well, how do you guys feel about wrapping it up?
Anything
So
you
good.
got a rant on, man?
A rant. I think I've done a lot of ranting, honestly.
Yeah,
So,
that's
I
part
don't.
of
I
it.
don't have something specific. Do you?
What about
Maybe
you?
I'll
Legs?
think of something if you have something.
No, I mean, it kind of ties into the whole death of common sense thing when we're talking about our political parties, and as just a guy who we're talking about the echo chambers and the news that we watch and how it affects the way that we think. And as a guy that has 3 daughters, I remember just not too long ago when everything was about on the side of the Democrats. As a man without a party that shows up on the paper, really, everything was about one party is not watching out for women. One party is all for basically. One party is actively acting to the detriment of women, taking away women's rights and such. And I did start to think, this is the way that media affects us. I started to think, okay, I can get behind that as a guy with 3 daughters. I've got to go with the party that sides with women. And thinking maybe these are my people. And then all of a sudden, it became the party that's taking care of women is also, by the way, the girl that's going to be wrestling your daughter might have a dick. And when your daughter is in the locker room after, there may be dicks in there. And that's normal. That's okay. And, when I tried to voice my opposition to that, thinking I'm on the side of women, say, hang on, it's not really okay. All of a sudden it was shut up with your toxic masculinity. Shut up with your white privilege. You don't have a voice. You're not allowed to speak. And this is the voice that's protecting women. I thought it was that was something that I really have been pissed off about, and I know the whole country is pissed off about that. And to be opposed to that is to be against gay people. That's not even the same issue. I'm very in favor of gay marriage. I'm very pro-gay. It's a very libertarian stance.
Mm-hmm.
Stay the fuck out of our personal lives. But to have that, literally shoved in our faces, shoved in our daughters' faces, that's something that really has pissed me off. So I would just say watch out from the side that says that they're protecting women. They're not. That's not okay. And we need to be able to voice that opposing opinion without being vilified, without being demonized. That's just, it's not okay. That was my little rant. As a father of 3 children, 3 women, 4 kids, 3 of them are women. That's bullshit.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I'll kind of piggyback off of that a little bit because I think, it's with the tribalism. Everybody pushes each viewpoint as an extreme, and it's very easy to do. And when people are basically strawmanning your argument one way or the other, it's very easy, like you said, with the trans, sports or bathroom thing. It doesn't, in my opinion, if you have that opinion, you're not necessarily transphobic, but you're just looking out from the perspective of your daughter. You're seeing how they might have a right. Like, it just depends on perspectives. I think every issue can be demonized to the maximum. You could say, the border, you're either for freedom or you're not. Well, it's not that simple, right? You might think, hey, we can obey some laws. With abortion, you look at it, that's, the most polarizing issue. And I think, there's validity in both sides where if you just look at the extremes, one is saying, no matter what, you can't have an abortion, which is a small percentage of people. And then on the other side, it's like, any abortion is fine, even, 9th month and just out of what is it called? Like just convenience, basically. But it's like, and most people don't agree with that either. So it's like there's a middle ground that I think gets missed a lot of times where people might say, hey, maybe I agree with the exceptions. Maybe I agree with all of the birth control, even if it's, technically killing zygotes or whatever, like IUDs. Maybe I think it should be, the like, what is the word? There's a better word than out of convenience, but you know what I mean? But there's like a certain time period where people might agree, but then it gets up to this point, and this is why. And I think there can be a lot of nuance to it, and people can draw their line at different spots. But I think to like villainize people, which is very easy to do.
Yeah.
It's very easy to just be like, well, you don't support women's rights. Or it's very easy to just be like, you want to murder babies. Both of those sound terrible, and they put you in a box. When in reality, conservatives are just looking out for a human life that they view as very precious. In reality, liberals are looking out for the health and well-being and the livelihood of the mother and then potentially the baby when it's born. I think they're valid takes, and that's obviously the most polarizing one, but I think you can do that with every issue. You can go to gun control and just be like, they're trying to take all of our guns. You can go to it and say, people should have nukes. Like, you could go, you know what I mean? You could go to every issue. And
we should protect the trans community.
Right.
They absolutely should feel safe.
Absolutely.
It's horrible to think what the suicide rates are in that community.
Right.
That's terrible. They should feel safe and protected. That's not the answer.
Right. So there could be, and that's an 80-20 issue as well. And I think there's a lot of emotion that gets tied into it where it pins you in a box of you're saying that's a hateful message and you're transphobic and you're this and that. And it's like, well, no, I just think there's 2 parties that are potentially being oppressed here in different ways. And it's important to understand, I'm weighing this versus the other thing. And I'm just saying maybe we could go about it a different way.
Yeah.
And I think there's a ton of issues, and I think most people would agree with that on a ton of issues where it's like, hey, it's not going to, no matter what, it's not going to be perfect because everybody's going to be upset no matter what. Everybody's going to want, at the end of the day, politics, everybody's going to want the thing that benefits them the most. 90% of the time, people just go off of what it is for them. If you have a bunch of student debt, you're going to want student loan forgiveness. If you didn't go to college and you paid off your debt, you're going to be like, no, I don't want that. I don't want to have to pay for that.
Yeah.
If you everything. So you could go down the list and you could talk about every issue, and it's going to be the thing that affects you the most and benefits or doesn't benefit you the most. So you have to be able to, I think what's important, and I've had talks with you about this before where, we've talked about issues that, you're like, well, technically if this happened, this wouldn't benefit me and my other businesses, but you're like, but I still agree with it in principle. And in that regard, I still agree with it. And I respect that. I think that's like a thing that I think most people should do. And I try to do it. It's obviously very tough for everyone to do that, right? You're going to naturally be like, I got to do the thing that benefits me. But I think it's important to stick to your principles and just try to be consistent, and I think it's very important, like you said, not to follow party lines every time where it's like, hey, when Trump says things I don't agree with, I'll say it. I don't have to get super emotional about it. So like with tariffs, I disagree with tariffs, but do I think we need to be going crazy about them? No, we have tons of taxes I disagree with.
Sure.
Like all of them, literally. So, it's like we could sit here and we could cry about everything, but I think it's important to take the things you disagree with and take them with a grain of salt and be like, hey, it's not the end of the world. We got to battle this out a respectful way. Take the things you do like, try to push towards those, battle them out in a respectful way. Don't just assume the worst in people. And have conversations. I think what we talked about earlier, where I think right now, in my opinion, there's a lot of like podcasters or TikTok influencers and stuff that on the right are willing to engage. They'll go out in public and they'll engage, like Charlie Kirk is an example. And there's a bunch of them. But then you have on the left, you have a lot of people who are kind of like more prideful, or maybe, I don't know what the word is, but they condemn people for reaching out and talking. Like we were talking about with Bill Maher and Sean Penn, is like, you have to have conversations. People really got on Gavin Newsom for going and sitting down with Charlie Kirk. And even though he didn't do very well, I respect that he went on there and had the conversation, because you need to have those conversations in order to like chisel out the discrepancies in these issues, the nuance in these issues. They have to be that way. And you have to, if you're right, if you have the facts and you have the education level and things like people say on the left, then you should have no problem addressing your viewpoints with a rational, like coherent thought process, as opposed to just getting emotional and being like, you're bad. Like every time it's just a label.
Take your ball and go home.
Right. Yeah. Take your ball and go home. It's like you get upset and you just become irrational. And it's like, well, that doesn't do anybody any good.
Especially when you don't have a ball anymore.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, you can't even have conversations. And so that's why I like too, when people, I've heard people say things like, oh, how does Trump get so many votes? I didn't know there were so many bigots out there. And I'm like, that's such a closed-minded mentality.
Yeah.
And that's a very good reflection of like why you don't know, because you're going to label somebody a bigot. So they're not going to talk to you about it. If you can't even disagree with somebody and like have a real conversation with them, they're not going to sit here and tell you their viewpoint. They're just going to move on because they don't care, because they're emotionally stable, and you can say things that I disagree with, and I'll hear you out and I'll hear your opinion, and I'll explain to you calmly what my opinion is and why it differs and things like that, and where I draw lines and why. And we can do that all day, and it's fine. And we're not going to yell at each other and call each other names. But there's a lot of people who can't do that. And then they wonder, why doesn't anybody voice that opinion?
Why do we lose?
Yeah, why do we lose so bad? I don't understand. It's like, yeah, because you get upset if anybody says anything. Like COVID was the biggest example of that, where it's like people would literally, if you said, like, for example, for me, I wasn't against the vaccine, but I was also like, hey, this thing, COVID came out a year ago and they already have a vaccine, which means not only did they research the virus, come up with some sort of solution, or many, and then they have to test it. And you did all of that within 1 year. I'm like, man, maybe science has just gotten insane, or maybe it might not work, or maybe there could be some side effects we don't even know about because we didn't do more than a year's worth of trials.
Yeah.
Like even if you solved the problem on day one when COVID dropped, you still, if you did clinical trials from that day on, you still only have 1 year. That does not give you any sort of long-term analysis on how it works. So I'm like, the COVID vaccine, when people would say like, oh yeah, it has like microchips in it and stuff like that, obviously there's going to be some idiots who just jump to the crazy on the right. But to just be like, no, it works. It's safe and effective. It works perfectly. Once you're vaxxed, you're good. I'm like, And then you find out a month later, everybody's still getting COVID with the vax. And you're like, okay, so definitely.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to it, but it's like, you get to this point where you got this tribalism, and people to this day are still defending all that. And I'm like, how? How do you live through that? You see all of it, and people would get so emotional about it.
That's a side that loves shifting goals right there.
Oh, yeah. That was a crazy goalpost shift. And then the gaslighting now where they're like, oh, well, Trump was president during that. And I'm like, Trump said, I remember distinctly, Trump said a lot of things that ended up being right. And y'all blasted him for it. One would be that, hey, this was a man-made virus that came out of a lab in Wuhan, and he was called a racist, which I don't even understand because China is a country, but okay. So he was labeled a racist for saying it came out of a lab in Wuhan. They knew that within a few months. It's been confirmed by the whoever it was, CDC or whoever. They confirmed that that was true. We know that, and we knew that then, but they didn't announce it.
There's way better reasons to call him racist.
Yeah, right. But that's where I'm like, you're just blowing these like fake, I don't know. If you're getting excited about everything. So I would just say people need to think for yourself, call a spade on both sides, have some rational opinions, have some actual principles that you base things off of, apply that to everything equally. Try to. You're not going to be perfect. Try to stop falling for fake news, both sides. Yeah. And then have conversations, be more open to conversation.
That's a good takeaway. Have conversations.
Yeah, have conversations. Guys.
What do you think, Miley?
You need to listen to what we're saying. You got to have conversations, Miley. You're going to have to come out of this.
Yeah. The shell that you're in where you're not speaking to people over this, it's terrible.
She's a leftist.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's a wrap. Hopefully we've said something interesting. And if you enjoyed it, please tell a friend. And if you didn't, maybe tell an enemy. And until next time, guys, stay interesting. See y'all.
Peace.
Peace.